Linking tables and connections as you create them is covered in the tutorials on this channel that cover structure, SQL Server, and task data. This video sequence covers moving and relinking of pre-existing linked objects. Scenarios I've experienced that cause the need to relink objects include a PowerOpI solution might be developed on a laptop and later moved to a PC on the network or to an IT server. That might be for a more powerful system, or for 64-bit app installations, or for better access by coworkers. Later actions I've experienced on IT-managed servers can require further relinking. Files moved to a different server by IT, changed file path by IT due to drive replacement on failure, directory change, IT restructuring of org directories. You shouldn't have to relink very often. I had to do it 2 or 3 times over a 3-year project. You'll spend much more time editing table data to reflect changing plans and mitigations on the project, and sometimes adding a calculated field and structured key to handle some new reporting request. But relinking covers a bunch of files on several computers and can be disruptive. That's why I put together this video. Relinking is required because paths to and from a database are fully qualified. The paths cannot be specified using relative path notation. The first rule of relinking is that linking must be performed in this order. First, linking source tables, usually in Excel, as external tables into the database. That includes relinking MS Access and PowerQuery external links, and relinking SQL Server linked servers. Second, linking query results from the database to drive pivot and Power Pivot reports, creation of Excel tables, and Power BI Excel and desktop reporting. That includes data queries and updating source table links into SQL Server open row set queries and relinking those queries. Third, linking query results from the database into Visio to drive images. Links from Excel source tables into the database must be updated first. This is to ensure that upstream data query refresh operations will be successful as they are relinked. First, we'll cover relinking into MS Access. SQL Server will be covered later. Open your MS Access project. In Access menu, External Data, section Import and Link, click Link Table Manager. The Link Table Manager window pops up, listing tables linked into this Access project. Each link shows its current full path. Linked tables can come from one or more Excel workbooks. You must link one workbook at a time. You can only specify one updated path at a time. Checkmark all the tables linked to one Excel workbook. You can examine current file paths among the links to identify the workbooks. Checkmark Always Prompt for New Location, then OK. Windows pops up a File Explorer window. Select the new Excel source workbook in the new location. If the database will be used from external computers, the path must specify network qualification. Select the file path starting from the network object containing the workbook that contains these tables at the bottom of the directory pane at left in the File Explorer. When the new path is established, click OK in the File Explorer. When it's done, check the updated paths shown in the Link Table Manager. Now repeat this procedure, linking the next workbook until paths for all workbooks in this ACCDB project are correctly updated. Remember that a PowerOpI project may be distributed among several Access ACCDB files, and repeat this procedure for all of them on all computers on which they reside. The second step is to relink connections in Excel, pulling data from the relocated database. Basically, we repeat the linking method described in the structure video sequence for connecting Excel to a database. First, we'll describe manual processes for relinking Excel data connections, and on the next slide for relinking Excel PowerQuery connections. Following that, a semi-automated process will be described that uses VBA for relinking Excel data connections and PowerQuery connections from MS Access. Later in this video sequence, we'll cover relinking Excel both into and from SQL Server. Here are the steps to relink an Excel data connection with MS Access. In the Excel workbook containing connections driving reports, select and open each connection. Use Excel ribbon Data section Get and Transform Data, Existing Connections, pops up the connections in this workbook window. Right-click each connection in turn and select Edit Connection Properties. The Connection Properties window pops up. In Connection Properties, tab Definition, browse for and select the new location of its MS Access ACCDB file. Again, if the file is shared on the network, start from the network objects and select the network qualified path to the ACCDB file. Back in the Connections in this workbook window, repeat relinking steps for all relocated connections in the workbook. Finally, remember to update all Excel workbooks covering reports linked to a database whose location has changed. Next, the manual relinking process for PowerQuery. In each workbook containing reports linked to an Access database whose location has changed, select each PowerQuery connection in the usual way. Excel Data ribbon, section Queries and Connections, click button Queries and Connections to open the pane at the right edge of the workbook window. In the Queries and Connections pane, right-click each query in turn and select Edit. For each, the Query Editor window pops up. Select File tab, Data Source Settings. The Data Source Settings window pops up listing the current path. Click Change Source. The Microsoft Access Database Source panel pops up. Browse to and select the new location of the ACCDB file. Use the network qualified path if the file is shared to other clients. Repeat the relinking for each PowerQuery connection in the workbook to be relinked to a relocated database. When relinking the workbook is complete, relink each additional client workbook containing PowerQuery connections linked to a database whose location has changed. Reminder, those workbooks may be located on multiple client computers. We'd rather relink using VBA automation. Automated updates avoid manual errors and are more likely to be solidly repeatable. There will be a number of connections in Excel that need to be relinked, and it's both more convenient and more reliable to relink them all using VBA. Code is provided on the website at www.softtoysoftware.com in file linking code.txt and contains installation instructions also summarized on this slide. The UI for the relinking VBA is the structured table shown on this page. It covers relinking of Excel data connections to external sources, including Access and external Excel files driving reports in this workbook, link type values pivot source and MPP import in the table, and for PowerQuery connections, link type values web query and MPP query. Relinking to SQL Server is an extension of this covered on upcoming slides. Relinking the Access database to read Excel source tables still follows the manual method described earlier in Section 1, Link Excel to Access, and we'll cover Visio relinking on the next slide. Relinking SQL Server data queries to source tables will also be covered on upcoming slides. The structured table shown on this slide is named TBL Connection Config, pronounced Table Connection Config, and is on a tab named Data Sources. You must set up both of these. Table Connection Config includes a record for each Excel data connection and PowerQuery connection to be relinked. Fields include Connection Name, identifies a connection named in Excel to be relinked. Primary path, path to the Access database ACCDB file containing a query or table to be relinked, or to an Excel workbook containing a table or worksheet to be relinked. The illustration shows these as network paths, which is typical. Relative path syntax is supported, including backslash and dot backslash and dot dot backslash for directory down, this, and up, and will be translated to fully qualified paths required in connections. Alternate path, optional, used if the primary path is inaccessible. For a local source, it could be used to state a relative path in case the fully qualified path becomes unusable. Table name, query name to be linked, or worksheet name $, or named range, or named shadow range, which is a named range shadowing a structured table. and close it in brackets if non-alphanumeric characters are included. SQL or SQL, an optional field not shown here stating a SQL string to be set into the data connection command text field. If specified as dash character, default SQL will be used, which is select star from table name. This field is used to set up a more complex query in a connection to MS Access or SQL Server. SQL Server will be covered in a subsequent slide. Link type indicates the functionality of the connection. Values include pivot source, an Excel data connection driving a report or table. Web query, a PowerQuery connection driving a report or table. MPP import, an Excel data connection importing an MS Project export file into an Excel structured table. Note the form of the table name field used in this record. Task _ table $1, all inside brackets because of the underscore and $sign characters. That worksheet name is set by the MPP export VBA in MS Project export.txt. MPP query, a PowerQuery connection importing an MS Project export file into an Excel structured table. The table name field would again be task _ table $1, all inside brackets because of the underscore and $sign characters. Using the table in VBA. To relink connections according to the parameters in table connection config, create a button object on Excel tab data sources to run private sub command button 2 _ click, a procedure in VBA file linking code.txt which you must install. This will relink connections with link type pivot source, web query, MPP import, or MPP query in table connection config, and will refresh all connections with refresh all enabled when the connection was created. This includes pivot source or web query, but excludes MPP import or MPP query. I would label this button as link to database file specs. To update dates imported from MS Project, this is typically done in a data source workbook to drive a build table in that workbook. Create a button object on Excel tab data sources to run private sub command button 1 _ click, seen in VBA file linking code.txt. I would label this button as update dates. Clicking that button will refresh connections with link type MPP import or MPP query in table connection config. To reconnect a Visio VSDM image file to a task data export XLS file from MS Project, each VSDM file connects individually to the XLS export file, so each must be reconnected. Open each VSDM file. In Visio, show the external data window, Visio ribbon Data, Show Hide, and checkmark External Data Window. Right-click in the displayed external data window and choose Configure Refresh. Click the button Change Data Source, then Microsoft Excel Workbook, and select or browse to the XLS export file. Remember the file is named after the MPP file from which it was exported. Use the network file path if the file is shared, then choose task _ table $1 parens worksheet. As the dialog progresses, checkmark first row contains column headings and rows to include all data. Uniquely identified by unique ID or roll-up task UID if you're managing that. When the dialog completes, in Visio right-click the external data window and choose Refresh Data. Then repeat for each Visio file that's been relocated and/or which should relink to a relocated task data export.xls file exported from MS Project. The OPI linking sequence continues in OPI linking Part 2 SQL Server. The playlist will continue automatically, and there's a link on the end screen to Part 2 and a link back to the playlist. Please subscribe to this channel and like the videos.